to this video in the QPSMR Companion CATI Up and Running series. And in this video, we're going to be looking at the practicalities of putting a questionnaire together so that it can be used in a CATI interview. So if you're new to setting up questionnaires, you really should start with the QPSMR Companion Up and Running series, not the CATI videos, because that will take you through all the ways of putting together questions and a questionnaire. This video is focused on the things that are additional that you do to prepare a survey for a CATI survey. So let's get started. So we're starting here with a prepared questionnaire, and let's look at some of the facets of this particular questionnaire. So the first thing that you'll notice is a block of questions here, which are details of people that we might be contacting for this survey. So you can see here we have the name, their address, their postcode, whether they're a member of an organisation or not, whether they attended an event or not. So about 7 different entries here that are coming from another file. And just to match that up with that file, let's go to this file here. And you can see we have a file of about 30 people with a serial number, their name, the 3 lines of their address and their postcode, a telephone number, and a code to indicate whether they're a member or not a member, a code 1 for they did attend an event and no for not attending an event. Now, one column that you must have in this spreadsheet is a column that's headed Tel Num. It must be called Tel Num exactly like that, and it should contain the telephone number of the person that you want to contact for your survey. So these are the fields. Now these fields here, these names for these fields here must match the names that are used in your survey. So if we go over or go back to our survey, you'll notice that these names here, name, add 1, add 2, add 3, postcode, member and event, also exist on the questionnaire with exactly the same name. And if you want to pull that data through from your sample file, because that's what that spreadsheet effectively is, it's the sample of people that you want to interview on this survey with their telephone number, these fields here must be replicated with exactly the same names. Now this technique can actually be extended a little bit further. So for example, you might want to do a pre and a post test, and as a result of that, you might want to feed that information into the survey. So you could ask some questions about a brand, for example, and then 1 month later, you could ask some more questions about that brand, but you could pull in the data from this sample file here. So we could have a column in here, if you like, called brand, which was maybe a 1 if they recalled the brand before or recalled advertising, 2 if they don't recall advertising, and 3 if they're not sure. And by using that in the sample file, it means that we can use that information in the survey itself. So to use that example of whether they recall advertising for a brand, we could then filter some questions on people who did or didn't recall advertising in the first wave of a project 4 weeks ago. Similarly here we have whether they're a member and whether they attended an event. So again, we can filter questions or use that information as text within a question. So we can pipe that text through to a question so that it's actually part of something that an interviewer reads out. So you could actually say, at the previous survey, you recalled seeing brand A, and then you could go on from there and ask another question and ask them whether they bought it in the last month, that product, for example. So pulling data through from a spreadsheet, from a previous survey, or from other information such as their telephone number, their name, whether they are members of an organisation, all those sorts of things can be fed in the survey, and there's no limit to the number of fields that you can pull through. Now the next part of the survey is just like really any questionnaire that you might set up using QPSMR Companion for any other type of survey, whether it's a paper or a CAPI survey. this part of the questionnaire is exactly the same. If you're uncomfortable with setting up these questions here, or when you perhaps work with the downloadable files, if you want to find out how they've been set up, you'll need to follow the videos under the QPSMR Companion Up and Running series, and perhaps progressing to the Going Deeper series, rather than focusing on the CATI videos, which are a separate and special little group of videos. So we're not going to go through this here. I will just point out one or two little things as I go along, as I go through this, but you can see this is a perfectly normal questionnaire. So here they're asked to confirm whether they went to the event or not, so that we can check that against what we think we know about them from our database, from our other information or other sources. And then there's some questions here, rating scales and so on. Now, one thing that you might be interested in looking at here, but this applies to a lot of data entry, is you can build variables into your questionnaire. So if we look at check Q10 here, you can see that what this is arithmetic. So it's adding together the answers at Q10A, Q10B and Q10C, because we're expecting a total of 100. So there's 3 questions here which ask respondents the percentage of their income spent on their car, on daily expenditure and other. So those 3 figures in Q10A, Q10B and Q10C should add to 100. We add those numbers up. If they do add to 100, we're fine. If they don't, we can use a hold to say that we want to check that back to the back, so that the respondent has a chance to re-enter that data, or sorry, to be re-interviewed for that data, so that it can be re-entered by the interviewer, so that hopefully it does add to 100% and they proceed as a clean, if you like, clean data questionnaire. So we can do those sorts of things, but basically this is a standard questionnaire that we've got here, and this is where you'll start typically when you put a CATI questionnaire together. So let's now move on to the next step of the process. Having built this questionnaire, we can now feed it into a full CATI interview. Now, QPSMR comes with what we call some skeleton interviews. So you can see here now that I've got a skeleton interview. They come free with the software, and they're downloadable. And in here, you'll see that this is a fairly long file, which has got no questions in it at the moment, but has got all the controls that you need to manage a CATI survey. Now, we're not going to go through this in full detail because some of this is covered in a separate video. So you'll note in here there's a lot of ZZZ entries. They're not all ZZZ entries, but many of them are ZZZ entries. And what this means is these are things that are collected automatically as a survey progresses. So some of them are to do with the time of the interview, who done the interviewing, what computer was used, and so on. So many of those ZZZ commands collect that sort of information. So they're not questions on the questionnaire like most data that you have within a QDF, within QPSMR Companion. These are things that are being collected as you go along. And they include things like the number of keystrokes that someone inputs as they go through each survey. So that can monitor perhaps how productive interviewers are, or how much work they've done per hour or something like that. So these ZZ entries are covered in a separate video in the QPSMR Companion Going Deeper series. So if you want to find out more about them, please watch that video. But you'll see also there's some other settings here, like the TTTs in here. They define things such as the session we're in here and the version. And if we scroll down, and I'll come back to the ones we're going past at the moment, you'll see some very distinctive sections. So here, in the highlighted in this sort of blue colour here, you'll see there's 3 questions that are called TTT sample start through to TTT sample end. So in here, we expect to find the fields that we're bringing through from the sample file that we want to appear in the final data file. So the final data file will contain your survey data and any data that you pull through, plus all these things that it's picking up as it progresses through the interview, like the date and time of the interview and so on. So that's what ends up on the final file, as it were. So what we put in here? Well, it's already got telnum in here, so it's already got the telnum coming through, the telephone number from the sample file, which we saw here in this field here. It can be in any column, but it must be present. But we also want to pull through all these other fields. Now I've got these other fields set up here. So here they are. Here are the other fields. So we can just literally copy those, go over to our skeleton questionnaire and paste. And sure enough, now we have those 7 extra fields that will be pulled through from our sample file. Now they must go between the sample start and the sample end, but as long as they're there, they'll get added to your survey. Now we can move to the next part of the process, and we want the part where the questionnaire starts and ends. And you can see here, TTT start Q, TTT end Q. It has the text in here, but the green section. So if I highlight this item here, I can just go and grab all my questions I set up, copy, and paste them in. And you can see now I've got all my questions within the TTT start queue and the TTT end queue. So now we've got a full questionnaire built. Let's have a little bit look at what else we've got in here. Now, one of the parts that takes up actually a lot of the code in here are all the ZZZ un, ZZZDT and ZZZT9 and ZZZSR. And you'll see that they count down from 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and finally down to 0. Now what these fields store are appointments when you're going to recall someone. So that if, for example, you get through to a respondent the first time, the details of that call, whoever made the call, the date and time and the outcome will be automatically recorded in the 0 of these 4 fields. If there's a need to make an appointment and call a second time, the first recall will be in here and the second recall in these fields, the third recall in these fields, and so on for the 9th recall up here. Now if you want to make less than 9 recalls, perhaps after 4 failed calls, you don't want your interviewers to be wasting their time trying to contact people, you can delete these here. So if I were to delete down to here, let's go a little bit further down to here, that would mean it would only allow, so I won't delete these lines, but if I were to delete these ones I've highlighted, it would only allow for 4 callbacks for each respondent before it gave up trying to contact that particular respondent, whereas normally with this script here, it would do 9 callbacks, a total of 10 calls. So that's what's going on at the beginning there. Now there are some other ZZ entries there that collect information like the computer name and the username as we go along. You'll also see at the end here there's a series of outcomes to determine what's happened here, and at the end in ZZ end you can see there's 5 possible statuses that people can have, and they are a successful interview, so that in other words that the interview got to a completion, they fitted in with the sample or the quotas, they fitted in with the sample and they got to the end of the interview. You might find that the interview is out of quota, so you don't want this respondent. Maybe you've filled up your quotas. It might be somebody who's not eligible because they don't fit the sample characteristics that you need to be part of the sample. Or the respondent might have aborted the survey or because they didn't want to finish it, or they got bored, or whatever else it might be. Or they've done a partial interview with a view to hopefully finish it at a later time, because the software can do that you can interrupt an interview and set an appointment to complete an interview so that the respondent carries on at the question they left off. So having set all of those up, or having collected what outcome there was, you can put out different messages, so you can thank people. Here you can see if it's a successful interview, the message that is read out is that concludes the questionnaire. Thank you for your time. Goodbye. So that's if it's a successful interview, and that's a filter where the first outcome was true, and we got different messages for people who had different outcomes and so on. So we're collecting and storing the status of each respondent's details and saving that with the sample data, and attempting to re-interview them if we can, if there's enough callback attempts allowed, so that we can complete that interview or make that interview at a later stage. If it's a partial interview, we will try and finish that at a later stage by booking an appointment at a different date, a certain date and time, so that that can be achieved. So this really puts together your questionnaire. When you're ready with this, you can save it. You can use the answers menu just to test that it looks all right in terms of filtering, whether any randomization that you've got is working. So you can test it in the normal way without going any further. But if you're ready to carry on and actually proceed with a live CATI interview, you can do things like create quota files, create sample files, and if you're a supervisor, you can start to look at how your project is progressing in terms of interviews, appointments, and so on, and do all the other things that you want to do. This is a video here just to cope with putting the questionnaire together so that you're ready to start deploying it with interviewers to carry out interviews with respondents, building your sample files so that you can do that, and setting up your quotas. So that completes this video. Hope it's been useful to you. Please watch the other videos in the QPSMR Companion CATI Up and Running series. Thank you.